Okay, so I have 6 articles for you today. One of them is a very good story of resistance, historical story. I'm sure most of you have heard of Stonewall. Well, this took place even before Stonewall. But that is how I will treat you at the end of this video. So, let us just get right into it. The first article I have for you today, and the first 4 of these come from LGBTQ Nation. So the first article I have is Republicans outraged that a Democratic congresswoman used this naughty word. And the subheading is she has Republicans defending immigration to attack her, which I have to admit is objectively hilarious that Republicans are against any immigration except when they need to try to play gotcha and say how horrible Democrats are being. But anyway, Republicans are criticizing Becca Balint, a Democrat from Vermont, for making a crude comment about immigrants. Balint was speaking at a town hall meeting in Newport in late May, defending keeping the U.S. open to immigration. We know that our economy is completely bound up in immigration and migrant labor, Balint said in a video shared by NBC5. And of course, we have to come to a place in Congress where it's no longer a political issue, but we see it as an existential issue for the country. Her admittedly crude comment came next. If we don't have avenues for people to come here legally to work and to build a home here, I'm going to be really crude right now. We're not going to have anybody around to wipe our asses, she said, because we don't have enough people in our country now to fill the jobs that we have right now. Now Republicans are saying they're offended by what she said, both by the fact that she used a bad word and also because of what Vermont GOP Chair Paul Dame called the disturbing sentiment that the primary purpose of immigration is to perform labor that she deems beneath the dignity of others. Okay. Now, before I read the next paragraph, which is probably going to echo what I'm saying, yes, there are immigrants who have high-paying jobs, who are super intelligent, and who can take jobs like professional jobs, like doctor, lawyer. Nobody is denying that. But a lot of immigrants, probably the vast majority of immigrants, definitely those who are undocumented, are people who get jobs as maids and cooks and restaurant workers, and they go out into the fields to pick crops. Nobody is saying that that's the only type of work immigrants take. But that is a lot of what they take. They take jobs that no American would touch with a 10-foot pole. And why is that? Because they're exploited. And Americans are like, fuck that. We're not going to let you exploit us. And immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, are willing to be exploited simply because they just want a chance at a better life. And they're willing to endure the indignities to do that. So, Many immigrants have come to Vermont and gone on to remarkable careers in high-tech fields, including at our microchip manufacturing facility in Essex Junction, or have become world-class physicians serving in Vermont's hospitals, he said, as his party works to deport more people than have been deported in history, including immigrants who have legal rights to be in the U.S. And that's why I love this article. Because the same people who are like, let's deport all the illegals, let's deport people who even remotely look like they could be undocumented. So, and now they're like, oh, but there are good immigrants. Nobody is fucking saying there aren't. Literally nobody is saying. Just because there's an acknowledgement that a lot of the jobs that Americans would not be willing to do, or in this case, she didn't even say that they're not even willing to do it. She's saying that there's just not enough people to go around to do the jobs. So she's not even saying that, even though she did, it kind of sort of say that these are jobs Americans wouldn't do. She didn't even say that. I mean, I could see how you could think she implied it, but mostly she's saying there's just not enough workers to go around for all the jobs we need to have done. So anyway. Immigrants are also critical to our small business community, providing a wide array of goods and services that enrich our state. The way Congresswoman Ballant reduced Vermont's hardworking legal immigrants to little more than asswipers is embarrassing, Dane said. Interesting that you think that she's just talking about legal immigrants. I'm not sure where you got the idea she was talking only about legal immigrants, even though I'm sure there's, like I said, there's quite a few legal immigrants who are willing to do shit jobs that are below their dignity in hopes of moving up. But that's not what she said. She didn't say whether they're undocumented or not. She just said immigrants. She didn't go into specifics. Let me go back up to... Okay, if we don't have avenues for people to come here legally to work. She didn't say that today's legal immigrants. So, okay, she did mention legality. But, yeah, she's not saying that... Either way, she's still not saying that all legal immigrants do shit jobs. No, she didn't say that. She said that a lot of the jobs that immigrants do are shit jobs that Americans would not do. Or actually, like I said, she specifically said that there's just too many jobs for how many people are working. So yeah, they're wrong on two fronts. Number one, she never said that all immigrants are doing shit jobs and only shit jobs. Nor is she saying that there aren't any legal immigrants working in higher tech fields. She's also not, saying that, she's also saying that, well, we don't have enough workers, so we need to import workers. So what's the problem? So, yeah, there is that. And to provide a legal path to citizenship for those workers because, well, they provide an important service because Americans there aren't enough of us. Like I said, she did imply that that they're shit jobs that Americans won't do, but that's only if you squint hard. Mostly what she's saying is that there's just not enough that there's not enough workers to go around. Anyway, let's see. Balint responded by attacking the current president's anti-immigration policies, saying that he has repeatedly wrongfully detained, deported, and disappeared people, an immoral violation of fundamental human rights. Now, it's even worse. So he wrongfully detained, yes, deported, and disappeared people. But let's talk about the fact that the ICE agents who are doing the disappearing are not wearing any indication that they're ICE. So any schmuck can claim that they're ICE or the FBI and kidnap someone, and people will be like, oh, well, they're federal agents, so nothing to worry about. And it could turn into something much worse than that, because they've made this precedent where you don't need to identify yourself as a federal agent in order to detain people. So, yeah, it's even worse than just what she said here. But yes, look at Kilmar Abrego Garcia, look at, I can't think of Andres's last name. Who's the hairdresser who was sent to El Salvador, a Venezuelan, who was sent to El Salvador for no fucking reason. Because he had tattoos of crowns with mom and dad over them. Yeah, that's totally something a gang member would wear. What the hell? Then there's, like I said, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who they are now trying to paint as this horrible person and bringing him back to the U.S. to face trial because apparently they shat out some charges to charge him with because, that way they can claim that, they brought him back, but at the same time they're going to prove that they were right to do this in the first place, which makes you wonder, okay, you're giving him due process now. That's great. Why couldn't you have done that from the very fucking beginning? So yeah, wrongfully detained. There is that. Then there is the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who was just released from ICE custody, missed the birth of his daughter simply because he led Colombia protests against Israel's war in Gaza, simply because that must make him a member of Hamas, because why else would he be protesting the systematic murdering of entire people simply because there were members of said country that kidnapped civilians from Israel. Not to mention, if you indiscriminately bomb the hell out of the country that these hostages are in, what are the chances you're going to kill hostages? I mean, come on, guys. So he led protests against that and wanted Colombia to divest from Israeli companies, but that must make him a member of Hamas. Right, that makes perfect sense. And then you hear all these stories about immigrants, undocumented immigrants who have appointments with ICE, make their scheduled appointments with ICE, doing everything that they're told to do. And what do they get for it? they end up getting detained and deported because they're the low-hanging fruit. And before someone says that, oh, but Trump said he was going to deport the hardened criminals, he always said, we will start with the criminals. He never, ever, ever said that that's the only group that he's going to deport. I do not know where people got this idea that he said that was the only group he was going to deport. He never said that. He always said, we will start with the criminals. We will start with the hardened criminals. He never, ever said that's the only group we're going to deport. All right. He has made immigrants, regardless of status, feel unsafe and targeted all around the country. As Vermonters, we're so proud that we are seen as a safe place to land. I'm unwavering in my position that immigrants and refugees are welcome in Vermont and that every worker in every job deserves dignity and fair wages. From doctors and scientists to carpenters and farm workers, Vance said. So, more proof that she isn't claiming that all legal immigrants are somehow doing the shit jobs like picking fruit in 1,000,000 degrees heat. I mean, if she were, she wouldn't have said that. In a separate interview, though, she apologized for the remarks, calling them sloppy and insensitive. I want to apologize to anyone who was hurt by my comments, and I want Vermonters to understand that my position hasn't changed, she told the local news website VT Digger. It has been and always will be about protecting immigrants and fighting for dignity and fair wages for every single person in this country. And it's shit like this that makes me convinced that when people accuse the left of making it so you have to watch every word you're saying, because if you say the tiniest thing wrong, that they will pounce. And I'm sure there's people on the left who do that. But I really wonder how much of that is actually being instigated from the right, because they just want to play gotcha, and if they just want to make people wanting to be considerate of others and watch what they say so they don't offend others. And they're taking it to the ridiculous extreme so that, I don't know, so they can show that nobody can communicate anymore because someone's going to be offended by something. And I have to admit, you do not have a right not to be offended. If something someone says offends you, oh well, that's just life. People are going to say things either that they do not mean, that's offensive, or they're just assholes. But why would you want to live in a world where you don't know who to avoid? Why don't you want to live in a world where that person is free to be an asshole and I am free to stay the fuck away from them? So anyway, that is the end of that article. Alright, so next up we have MAGA pastor begs Christians to stop calling people gay because it's insulting. Now, when you first read this, at least I did, you think, wait a minute, someone who's MAGA who sounds reasonable, because I wouldn't say it's insulting, but let's face it. There are people who use gay to mean stupid. I mean, I was in high school once. I do know that term was bandied about, like being gay was synonymous with stupid. If you say something's gay, you mean it's stupid. So you think, okay, well, if that is insulting to gay people, because being gay is not stupid. But no, no, it's much, much worse than that. So the subheading, he compares gay people to terrorists, dogs, and sex cult leaders. I don't even know where to begin with those. Ugh. Anyway, right-wing conservative commentator and Donald Trump supporter, of course, Everett Piper, a man who compares LGBTQ plus people to Islamic terrorists, I don't even want to know why he thinks that, is asking Christians to stop referring to people as gay because it shows support for defining people by their sexual desires. No, it doesn't. In his column, he calls homosexuality a sin and compares a sexual orientation to that of dogs. Okay, let's try to unpack this. All right, like I said, where he gets the idea that LGBTQ plus people are like Islamic terrorists, not a clue, because it's actually your side that's more like Islamic terrorists. And it doesn't define people by their sexual desires. Unless you're telling me that by calling you heterosexual or straight, I'm defining you by your sexual desires. Because I'm pretty sure straight people get upset when you reduce them to nothing but sex. Because that's not what heterosexuality is. That's just your sexual attraction. And most heterosexuals are also heteroromantic, which means romantic. Has nothing to do with sex, romantic attraction. Same thing with homosexuality. I'm not even sure why. I just do not understand. I never understood why heterosexuality is more than just sex, but somehow homosexuality is only about sex. I never understood that, ever. All right, he calls homosexuality a sin. I would love to have him point to the Bible passage where it mentions homosexuality being a sin. Because, yes, I know everybody points to Sodom and Gomorrah, but you know what? Theologians and secular scholars, they will point out to the fact that no, that's not what it's saying. That has nothing to do with homosexuality. So, yeah. And compares it to dogs. Is he comparing it to the fact that dogs will hump a person's leg when they're in heat? Is that the comparison? Because I literally cannot think of what other comparison he could be making here. And I would love to introduce him to many, many straight men, because they would be willing to fuck whatever moves. So I'm not entirely sure that that's the comparison you want to make. Anyway, don't you realize that by doing so, you are parroting the lie that our desires define us and that people can be pigeonholed into categories of appetites, proclivities, drives, and desires? Piper, who once served as the president of the Oklahoma Wesleyan University, wrote in a recent column in the Washington Times. All right, so we shouldn't have labels for sexual orientation at all. We shouldn't talk about heterosexuality, not homosexuality, not pansexuality, bisexuality, asexuality. I don't know if I'm missing anything. We should just not talk about any of those things? How should we refer to people who are of a certain category then? I mean, seriously, what is your solution to talking about, say, HIV? Who does that disproportionately affect? Gay men. So, how are we supposed to talk about that if we shouldn't have a label for different sexual orientations? I would love to know what his answer is to that. Don't you see that your labels consign your neighbors to little more than the status of animals who are driven insatiably by their inclinations and instincts, he continues? You are stating that if someone wants to do something, that's just who they are and they can't do anything about it. Because sexual orientation is like that. I mean, are you conflating sexual orientation with behavior? Because behavior is a totally different thing. I mean, there are plenty of asexuals who have sex. That doesn't make them stop being asexual. So, I'm not sure what you're saying here. They're still not sexually attracted to anybody, but they're romantically attracted, and if they're romantically attracted to someone who is sexual, then obviously they're going to have sex. Whether it's because they just put up with it because they want to please their partner, or they actually enjoy it. So, this isn't pigeonholing people. You can't assume that you know everything about a person just because you say that they're straight. You don't know what their libido is like. You don't know anything about them. Heck, they could be celibate for all we know. So I fail to see why we're comparing them to animals. Well, actually, technically we are animals, so I'm not sure why we're making that distinction anyway, but yeah, sexual orientation is just who we are. Are you seriously saying that you could choose to not be straight? Because if you can, I have bad news for you about your orientation. Because you sure as hell are not straight then. Alright. His line about doing anything about it suggests his possible support of conversion therapy, the widely debunked and pseudoscientific practice of trying to change one's sexual orientation or gender identity. Ew. That's how out of this I am. And that didn't even come across my radar. And that's just ew. But that would make sense if he thinks that, he could totally bone a guy, because obviously sexual orientation is changeable. But oddly enough, they usually say it's only changeable for non-straight people. Somehow, this idea that straight people can then change their sexual orientation somehow is laughable. And I just do not understand it. Because you're normal, that this doesn't apply to you. Because apparently logic only works for those who aren't normal or something. The methods of so-called conversion therapists include encouraging a queer person not to masturbate. Okay. Redirecting their sexual energy into exercise. Covert aversion, a fancy name for imagining possible negative consequences of being queer. Seriously, they don't have to imagine it. They're surrounded, if they're in conversion therapy, they are surrounded by assholes already. They don't need to imagine negative consequences. Bible study, right, because there is absolutely no Christian who ever lived who happens to also be gay. Directing same-sex sexual desire onto opposite-sex partners. I'm going to say that doesn't work. If you have a same-sex desire, I'm sure you can imagine being with whomever your preferred partner is while having sex with the opposite sex. That is not the same as directing your desires onto the opposite sex. Not the same. Inflicting pain and humiliation anytime LGBTQ plus feelings arise, which is just so messed up on so many levels. And forcing people to act out stereotypical gender roles in behavior and personal appearance. Right, because as we all know, there are no macho gay men. And as far as women are concerned, there are no lipstick lesbians. What the hell? Oh my God, this is just so much which is laughably wrong and just so disgusting to realize that this is a thing. Okay, now, straight people masturbate. I hate to break it to you, but straight people masturbate. Asexuals masturbate. Aromantic asexuals masturbate. That does not change their sexual orientation one fucking bit. Let's see. Redirecting their sexual energy into exercise. That's probably why you hear about all the alpha males in the manosphere who spend way too much time in the gym, because they literally do that. And I don't think it's because they think they're gay. Nope, they just do that because, well, they don't know how to deal with females. Let's see. What else? Did I miss anything else? Nope, I think I covered everything else. A 2013 survey showed that 84% of former patients who tried ex-gay therapy said it inflicted lasting shame and emotional harm. No shit. I mean, this is nothing but abuse. Psychological abuse. Additionally, a March 2022 peer-reviewed study from the Trevor Project showed that 13% of LGBTQ plus youth nationwide had reported being subjected to conversion therapy. Of those, 83% were subjected to it before reaching the age of 18. Oh my God. These are the same douche nozzles who scream how we need to protect children, and yet they are subjecting these children to abuse simply because they're not straight. Ugh. Nevertheless, Piper continues by stating that there's nothing more insulting than implying that someone's personhood is nothing more than the sum total of their proclivities and passions. Okay, so you don't like being called heterosexual then, I guess. It's unclear who he thinks actually believes that. LGBTQ plus people themselves generally know that it's only one aspect of their identities, and that even identity is only one aspect of a person's life. Exactly. So, like I said, I guess he has a problem with people calling him straight or heterosexual, because that just put that just shows him as desiring of the opposite sex um rather than showing him as a person, even though that's just a label so people know a part of them. I mean, my asexuality isn't everything that I am. I've mentioned it many times on this channel when it comes up, but I'm not pounding my chest telling everybody that is around me or that's within earshot that I'm asexual. Why? Unless a reason for it comes up, I'm not going to mention it, because I'm not just asexual. There's a lot of things to me. I'm asexual. I'm an atheist. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal, progressive. I am so many things that I don't see why one particular label just puts you in a little box. Now, that just says what he thinks about labels. And for the most part, people who have a problem with labels are probably those who don't need to find belonging anywhere because they have it. But the fact is, this guy is MAGA. I'm sure he pounds his chest about being MAGA. That's a fucking label. I mean, I just do not understand. Heck, the fact that I'm a woman is a label. Does that tell you everything about me? No. Because there are women who are girly girls. There are women that are tomboys. There are women anywhere in between. So, no, nobody thinks that in order to take on the label, they must fit certain criteria. As long as, in the case of sexuality, you're attracted to the opposite sex, okay? If you're only attracted to the opposite sex, that makes you heterosexual. That does not say what kind of person you're attracted to, just that it's the opposite sex. That's it. So there's variation amongst labels. You do not have to fit just because one person likes, I don't know, blonde or leggy women, or that they like curves or whatever it is. There's no one way to be heterosexual. As long as you're only attracted to the opposite sex, you're heterosexual. I'm not sure where people get the idea that you must fit in a small little box. But considering conversion therapy involves gender roles, stereotypical gender roles, maybe that's his problem. Maybe he's afraid that if people label him such, that means he must do A, B, C, and D, when nobody is saying that. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Believers in Christ of all people should know that people are made in the image of God. Okay, so you're a Christian. Again, another fucking label. We are not dogs. Okay, what does that have anything to do with anything? We are human beings. Okay, nobody's denying that. We have free will in choosing our behaviors, sexual or otherwise. And thus, we are defined by our Lord, not our libido. Okay, everything he's saying is true, but at the same time, he somehow manages to draw the wrong conclusion. Nobody is fucking saying anything about behaviors. Attraction is not behavior. Like I said, there are heterosexuals who are celibate. There are homosexuals who are celibate. That does not say anything about your behavior. There are gay men who are in the closet and have sex with women because they either are afraid to live their authentic selves based on where they live, or they are desperately trying to change their attraction to change their sexual orientation because they are under the impression that you can do that. Now, for some people, yeah, maybe you can change your attraction. Maybe you can change your orientation. For some people, they claim that their sexuality is fluid. Okay, great. But for most people, it's pretty static. It might be a case of you just learn something new about yourself, and so you change what label you use, but that doesn't necessarily mean your sexuality changed. It just means that you learned yourself better. Like, initially, before I settled on the term asexual, I thought maybe I was bi. Because I still wanted to be somewhat normal. And this being somewhat sexually attracted to someone, to me, seemed like it must be normal. Okay, maybe I'm not, because I was confusing aesthetic attraction with sexual attraction. And because I find both men and women aesthetically attractive, I figured, okay, maybe that's my thing. I'm bisexual. It turns out that, no, I'm asexual. Do I find both men and women attractive? Absolutely. But it does not pass my eyes. So, have we actually come to the point where we think it is edifying to define people by their sins? So you think having sex in general is a sin? Cool. If we want to cheat, does that make us a cheater? Yes, it does. If we want to lie, does that make me a liar? Yes, it does. If you want to steal, does that make you a thief? Yes. Can't we all choose to do otherwise, and in doing so avoid the label and the judgment he adds? Jesus Christ. You are conflating behaviors that people can choose to do. Like, nobody has this inherent need to cheat. Nobody has an inherent need to lie unless it's a little white lie, like, oh, there's this surprise birthday party for a friend, but obviously I can't tell them because it's a surprise, so you lie. But that's a choice you made because you knew that if you told the truth, that would destroy the surprise. So in that case, I guess you could say you didn't have a choice in the matter, but at the same time, technically you did. Stealing, obviously a choice. Obviously some people are in such dire straits that technically not much of a choice, because if you don't steal, you don't eat. So that gets a little hairy, but still not the same as sexual orientation. So, and again, dipshits like this, if you said something about them being straight, and since this guy's a pastor, obviously he chooses not to have sex. I'm assuming that he's of the sect of Christianity where you don't get to have sex. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming. And if that's the case, well, that just shows that, okay, you can choose not to have sex, but that doesn't change your sexual orientation. You are still straight, even if you're celibate. It depends on who you're attracted to, not who you are currently having sex with, because that is not the same thing. There are straight women who can have sex with lesbians, mainly because they've yet to find a man who knows how to give them orgasms, because apparently finding an obvious clit is too hard for some men, which I'm not sure how that works. Does that suddenly make them lesbians? No, it just means that they're women who found lesbians who are willing to get them off because they've never had an orgasm or something. It's not, that doesn't change their sexual orientation whatsoever. That still makes them straight. Because again, it's about who you're attracted to and not your behavior. No one needs to admit the defeat of just being born that way. Your neighbors are not animals. Yeah, actually they are. Humans are animals. They're mammals. They are human beings, he concludes. And again, human beings are mammals. We have mammary glands, for fuck's sake. Why do you think that term is used? What the hell do you think mammary glands are? It is not that hard. Unsurprisingly, Piper has expressed numerous far-right anti-LGBTQ plus views on his X account, including support for the so-called parents' rights group, Moms for Liberty, which was named as an anti-LGBTQ plus extremist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and their claim that all LGBTQ plus inclusive children's books are pornography. Right, because good books with just straight characters couldn't possibly be pornographic. What is wrong with this world? Why are people so caught up with LGBTQ plus means sex? No. I went through a brief time where I was reading romance novels. Now, granted, I was trying to read it it was about high schoolers, so I thought, okay, I'll read this, and I just rolled my eyes over the sex scenes. Totally rolled my eyes. But there was plenty of sex scenes in these books. And these were all straight characters. Straight characters having straight sex. So, no. Not all. It's not just LGBTQ plus books are pornographic, straight books are not. Not how any of this works. During Pride Month 2023, Piper shared an X post referring to the LGBTQ plus community as the rainbow sex cult. Oh, really? Which claimed that queer people use social media to indoctrinate children. Okay. Again, with the fucking indoctrination bullshit. I grew up only seeing representations of straight people and straight couples. And yet I am still asexual because this is not about indoctrination. This is literally about people just having to figure out their sexual orientation on their own. This has nothing to do with, you do not need to be indoctrinated into this. You just happen to use this as a way of discovering that you're a certain sexual orientation. That does not mean you are indoctrinated. It just means you're learning about yourself. I really do not know why this is so hard for people. Any nation that devotes an entire month to glorifying pride is one teetering on the edge of disaster. We now stand divided rather than united because of our arrogance and pride, Piper wrote during Pride Month 2024. Again, with this fucking misunderstanding of pride, willful misunderstanding of pride. Pride does not mean what you think it means. It does not mean the biblical pride, for one thing. However, I'm sure he's proud to be a Christian. So, what's the fucking difference? And people have explained to me that because it's not the sinful pride, it's just the opposite of not being ashamed, which is the fucking definition of gay pride. This is not about, oh, I'm super proud to be gay. This is more of, I am not ashamed to be gay. I am not going to let you shame me into being something I'm not. That is what pride is. And like I said, towards the end of this video, I will share another story, since I'm sure most of you are aware of the Stonewall riots. More fodder for why pride exists. Because again, people who write this shit don't understand why it exists. It exists because we are not going to let bunch of straight people tell us that there is something wrong with us, that there is something we should be ashamed of for existing. And we're just saying, fuck off. We are not going to be ashamed of the fact that we exist. We are going to be proud of the fact that, we don't have to hide who we are. Because why should we? There is absolutely nothing wrong with us. We just happen to be different from you. And there is nothing wrong with that. He has also declared women's sports as dead due to the LGBTQ plus misogyny, by which he means the inclusion of transgender athletes. Oh, for fuck's sake. Okay. Now, I've mentioned this many times before. Number one, trans women, because let's face it, they're talking about trans women. They completely ignore trans men. Trans women, especially now, if they haven't gone through male puberty, I don't see what's misogynistic about it. Because if they never went through male puberty, they don't have any inherent advantage over straight women, over cis women. I'll get my terms right. And so that's one thing. And number two, not all athletic endeavors require something that makes men inherently superior to women. So even if you went through male puberty, depending on what sport you are in, you do not necessarily have to have an inherent advantage over cis women simply because of that. It depends on the sport. I mean, you are not going to have an inherent advantage in darts, in chess, in curling. You are not going to have an inherent advantage. Why? Because none of that requires superior strength. So even if male puberty gives an inherent advantage, what advantage are they getting in those sports? They're not. So it depends on what sport we're talking about. It depends on how long you've been on hormones. It depends on so many factors. It depends on whether you went through male puberty. It depends on so much that you can't just blanket say that trans athletes are bad because they pollute women's sports somehow. Because again, nobody says shit about trans men. And I understand why, because, well, these are people who were assigned female at birth who decided to change to, well, I shouldn't say change, but decided to transition to male because they see themselves as men. However, and I understand that for the very reason people are freaking the fuck out about trans women, they're not about trans men because they see them as harmless, because they used to be female. So, and females are inherently harmless or something. So I do understand that, but it destroys any argument you make when trans men do anything well. I mean, I will show you trans men with six packs. I will show you trans men that you would not want to meet in a dark alley. I can show you trans men who you would never, ever in a million years guess that they're trans. That, it's just, I understand the argument, but at the same time, either testosterone affects people or it fucking doesn't. You can't say that in cis men testosterone does X, Y, and Z, and then completely ignore that for trans men. Because if testosterone is so horrible, this should totally affect trans men. And it's just so, I just do not understand why trans men are generally ignored. But anyway, that is the end of that article. All right, I'm an hour in, and I still have quite a few articles. Okay, so let's move to Article 3. Supreme Court issues devastating ruling for trans youth and Tennessee gender-affirming care ban case. So, keeping with the trans theme, one expert said that the decision basically legalizes anti-trans discrimination in all forms. Okay. The Supreme Court ruled today in favor of, this was written on the 18th, June 18th. The Supreme Court ruled today in favor of Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth in the case of U.S. versus Skermeti. It was a 6-3 decision, so along party lines, with the court's Republican appointees opposing trans rights and the Democratic appointees supporting trans rights. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the opinion for the majority, and Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan wrote dissenting opinions. Justices Amy Coney Barrett, Samuel Alito, and Clarence Thomas wrote concurring opinions. The ruling says that Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care does not discriminate on the basis of sex or transgender status, which the plaintiffs argue made it unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause. The ruling will allow the 25 states that currently have such bans on the books to continue to enforce them. Skrmetti concerns 3 families of transgender youth, as well as a doctor, who argue that they're victims of Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. They argue that they were being deprived of essential medical care on the basis of their sex, since the gender-affirming care ban only bans such care for trans youth. For example, a teen boy who wants surgery to move his breasts in order to be treated like and feel more like a boy could get it under the Tennessee law, but only if he was assigned male at birth. And let's face it, most men don't end up with breasts. Because unless you're intersex, that's probably not going to happen. And even then, there's different flavors of intersex, so. The families and doctors sued with help from the ACLU. ACLU attorney Jay Strangio argued the case at the Supreme Court and was the first trans lawyer to do so. Oh, I love Chase. He's awesome. Roberts, in the majority opinion, wrote that the law doesn't discriminate on the basis of sex or on the basis of transgender status, saying that it only makes distinctions based on a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Okay. That is the same definition of trans identity that the Trump administration is using for the trans military ban, which also bars people with symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria from joining the military, even if they don't have a formal diagnosis. Except for the fact that the only people who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria are literally trans people. What the hell? In her dissenting opinion, Sotomayor accused the conservative majority of refusing to call a spade because they wouldn't admit that the law determines access to the covered medications based on the sex of the recipient. She warned that the ruling does irrevocable damage to the Equal Protection Clause and invites legislatures to engage in discrimination by hiding blatant sex classifications in plain sight. I can't begin to tell you just how incredibly fucked trans people are here, wrote one trans clinical instructor at the Harvard Law School Cyber Law Clinic, Alejandra Carballo, on Blue Sky. This will pour gasoline on the Trump administration's attacks on trans people, and they will get even harsher and more cruel. The Supreme Court is greenlighting the eradication of trans people from society. She wrote that discriminating against people with gender dysphoria was upheld as constitutional in the decision, which could be used for other forms of discrimination. For instance, they could strip everyone with gender dysphoria of security clearance in the government, declare everyone with gender dysphoria a national security threat, and purge them from the government entirely. The trans military ban will be upheld under this. And all I can say is don't give them ideas. Most importantly, states can now just ban gender-affirming care for everyone, including adults. We'll likely see that coming soon, in addition to federal government efforts to eliminate access for all trans people. Today's ruling is a devastating loss for transgender people, our families, and everyone who cares about the Constitution, said the ACLU Strangio in a press release. Though this is a painful setback, it does not mean that transgender people and our allies are left with no options to defend our freedom, our health care, or our lives. The court left undisturbed Supreme Court and lower court precedent that other examples of discrimination against transgender people are unlawful. We are as determined as ever to fight for the dignity and equality for every transgender person, and we will continue to do so with a defiant strength and restless resolve and a lasting commitment to our families, our communities, and the freedom we all deserve. This is a heartbreaking ruling, making it more difficult for transgender youth to escape the danger and trauma of being denied their ability to live and thrive, said Sasha Butchert of Lambda Legal. But we will continue to fight fiercely to protect them. Make no mistake, gender-affirming care is often life-saving care, and all major medical associations have determined it to be safe, appropriate, and effective. This is a sad day, and the implications will reverberate for years and across the country, but it does not shake our resolve to continue fighting. And that's the other thing. Even if you have a problem with minors receiving gender-affirming care, the fact that medical associations are saying, yes, this is the correct course of treatment, you're just basically saying we will not listen to doctors. We will not listen to the experts, which makes me wonder why anybody who says that actually goes to see a doctor. Because if you're not going to accept their expertise in one aspect, why are you accepting it in other avenues? I wouldn't want to go see an expert when I, to their face, say, you do not understand XYZ. In that case, I would go see another doctor. If you're going to argue with a profession as a whole that they don't know what they're talking about in one aspect, then you shouldn't go see a doctor, ever. I mean, just live in a cave, and if you end up with a disease or with something as simple as tetanus, just let yourself die. Why? Because you have decided that you do not trust doctors. You don't trust the medical community in one aspect, then you shouldn't trust them at all. So just, basically take yourself out of the gene pool. Please. I mean, that would be logically consistent, but these people aren't logically consistent because they only care about things that don't affect them. If trans people don't affect them, they don't see the harm in doing this. But once it affects them, then all of a sudden everything should be done for them. Done to help them. It's just sickening how this works. Alright, so that is the end of that article. So this is the last one from LGBTQ Plus Nation. GOP rep insults senator's gender after he cried during an emotional speech. And all I can say is, what the fuck? Men can cry. And how do I know that this is a man who cried? Even before actually reading the article, which I did beforehand anyway. The fact is that that's the toxicity that we have. This idea that the only emotion seemingly that men should be allowed to portray is anger. And why is that? Because that's literally the only one that toxic males exhibit. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to have any other emotions which human beings have. I mean, men have tear ducts, for God's sakes. They are allowed to cry. I do not see why this is a problem. Senator Alex Padilla was arrested while doing his job. Representative Ana Paulina Luna thinks he's a danger to women. So let's find out where his being emotional and her making fun of that leads him to being a danger. Anti-LGBTQ plus rep Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, went on Fox News last night and mocked Senator Alex Padilla, a Democrat from California, for crying while discussing his recent arrest at the press conference of Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Luna said he had low testosterone and a clear swipe at his masculinity. Okay, first off, there are men with low testosterone. That is a thing. And even if he did, so what? But the fact is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with men crying. Absolutely none. They are allowed to get upset. They are allowed to cry. This idea that men are not allowed to cry is so toxic because I don't know why there's this idea that in order to be truly a manly man, you're not allowed to show emotion. You're not allowed to cry. I do not understand that. Why not? Like I said, men have tear ducts. They are allowed to cry. They are allowed to show emotion. There is nothing wrong with that. The idea that those somehow aren't allowed, that real men don't cry, is just, that's why men act out in anger and in violence, because they finally explode, because they're not allowed to properly show their emotions. So, of course men are going to get violent, because they're not allowed to show emotion until they finally explode. Noem was speaking about immigration enforcement and the protests in Los Angeles at a press conference when Senator Padilla, who is the ranking member of the Senate Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety, identified himself and said that he had questions for Noem. Multiple videos captured him being forcibly removed from the room and then wrestled to the ground in the hallway. In an emotional recent Senate speech, Padilla said National Guardsmen and an FBI agent escorted him into Noem's press conference, where he heard Noem say that federal law enforcement and military had been deployed to liberate Los Angeles from our governor and our mayor. Speaking to the Senate, Padilla said, "Colleagues, let that fundamentally un-American mission statement sink in. To somehow liberate us from the very people that we democratically elected to lead our city and our state. That is not a mission focused on public safety, and it simply is not and cannot be the mission of federal law enforcement and the United States military," he added. He then visibly became upset as he recounted being physically and aggressively forced out of the room, even as I repeatedly announced I was a United States Senator. "I was pushed, pulled, and struggled to maintain balance," he said. "I was forced to the ground, first on my knees and then flat on my chest." Luna mocked Padilla on Fox News anchor Jesse Waters last night. Waters asked Luna if it was an attractive look when men cry on national TV like Senator Padilla. "No," she responded. "In fact, I think he's suffering from low testosterone." Okay, now I'm not going to say anything about what she finds attractive. If she thinks that men shouldn't cry, well, I think that she has a strange idea of what men are allowed to do. But fine, if that's how she feels, she can find a man who never shows emotion and who will most likely end up beating her to death simply because he was not allowed to show emotion any other time. That doesn't say shit about your testosterone levels. I mean, nothing screams testosterone equals violence than this. because that's generally what she means when what people mean when they say men shouldn't cry, because there should be only one thing men know, and that's violence. It is just absurd. The DHS has argued that Padilla didn't identify himself and lunged at Noam and officers, despite videos showing him identifying himself and not lunging. But, we live in a time where, people will ignore obvious evidence. In a statement, the DHS said that Padilla chose disrespectful political theater. And we will get more on that in a minute. But Democrats have condemned the attack on a sitting U.S. Senator as an authoritarian move intended to make members of Congress more afraid to speak out. Waters asked Luna, could you imagine a Republican senator lunged at a female cabinet secretary and started screaming at her? It would be the war on women all over again. Yes, it would if, Padilla had actually done that, which he did not. Oh my God, they're trying to co-opt the Me Too movement and to try to act like they are the saviors of women or something. Give me a fucking break. Luna responded, real men don't do that. And the fact that he did, I think, is telling as to who he is as an individual, and vehemently condemn what he did to Secretary Noam. I would advise her to stay away from him. The guy's not a good dude. Okay. Now, I'm very confused. So, she doesn't condone violence against women, which admittedly is a good thing. But at the same time, they don't think that men should have any other outlet but violence for their emotions. What the fuck do you think happens to men who are not allowed to cry? Who are not allowed to show emotion? They bottle it up until they completely snap. And that usually happens violently. Do these people not know how basic humanity works? Do they not know how psychology works? I'm convinced these people don't know shit about shit. It is just maddening how little these people know about how anything in the world works. Luna has reposted content from an anti-LGBTQ plus social media accounts such as Libs of TikTok and has mocked pronoun usage during congressional hearings. How does she communicate if she doesn't use pronouns? That's what I'd like to know. In 2023, Luna said banned books referencing gender identity and sexual orientation were pro-pedophilia and pornographic, framing them as having a sexualized agenda, according to Watermark. Again, with conflating LGBTQ plus with sex. No! And sexualized agenda? Have you seen children's clothes? Especially onesies and boys' onesies. This idea that ladies' man, or for women, this idea, or for girls, this idea that they have to show that they're like damsels in distress, waiting for a man to save them or something. The only people who are sexualizing children are straight people. Gays are not the ones who are making these clothes for children. It is just unreal how every confession, every accusation is a confession with these people. It is just maddening. In 2019, Luna posted on social media that LGBT is being used to make abusing children socially acceptable. Pink News reported. Yeah, that's why you always hear about children being abused and kicked out of the houses of same-sex parents, right? Oh no, wait, those are bigoted straight people that do that. Anyway, that is the end of that article. So now, as of that, I am done with LGBTQ Nation. So, let's move on to NBC News. And I mentioned that we were going to get back to the political theater thing. Here is the article about that. J.D. Vance refers to Senator Alex Padilla as José Padilla in remarks blasting Democrats during LA visit. José Padilla was convicted on charges of supporting Al-Qaeda after he was initially accused of planning a dirty bomb attack in the U.S. He was eventually sentenced to 21 years in prison. Vice President J.D. Vance bashed Democrats at the state, local, and national levels Friday during his visit to Los Angeles, accusing top California officials of encouraging violent protesters and Senator Alex Padilla, whom he referred to as José Padilla, of engaging in political theater. I was hoping José Padilla would be here to ask a question, but unfortunately, I guess he decided not to show up because there wasn't the theater, and that's all it is, Vance said. It's pure political theater. These guys show up, they want to be captured on camera doing something. Huh. Like I said, every accusation is a confession because that's what the fuck he is literally doing. Vance's comments referred to an incident last week in which federal law enforcement agents handcuffed Padilla after he interrupted a news conference by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Padilla was forcibly removed from the event but not arrested. When asked why he referred to the senator as José Padilla, despite his first name being Alejandro, Taylor Van Kirk, a spokesperson for Vance, said he must have mixed up two people who have broken the law. Van Kirk did not elaborate. You know, I'm pretty sure those journalists who asked, at least I hope, understand that, yes, we absolutely 100% know why he referred to him as Jose. Now, whether he was aware of who José Padilla is, or if he was just picking a stereotypical Hispanic name, who knows? It's entirely possible that he didn't intend to pick a name that coincided with Al-Qaeda. Maybe he just picked a nondescript Hispanic name and didn't realize the connection. Because to realize the connection would take much more thinking capacity than I think J.D. Vance is capable of. In 2007, a jury convicted U.S. citizen José Padilla on charges of supporting Al-Qaeda after he was initially accused of planning to carry out a dirty bomb attack in the U.S. He was sentenced to more than 17 years in prison. It was later increased to 21 years. I have to admit, that is unusual. I don't remember when that's happened. A spokesperson for Senator Padilla, Tess Oswald, called Vance's remark another unserious comment from an unserious administration. As a former colleague of Senator Padilla, the vice president knows better. He should be more focused on demilitarizing our state than taking cheap shots, Oswald said on X. California Governor Gavin Newsom asserted that Vance's comments about Padilla, a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, was intentional. J.D. Vance served with Alex Padilla in the United States Senate. Calling him José Padilla is not an accident, Newsom wrote on X. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, meanwhile, condemned Vance for incorrectly naming the senator, saying he aimed to disrespect Padilla. You don't know his name, but yet you served with him before you were vice president, and you continue to serve with him today, because the last time I checked, the vice president of the United States is the president of the U.S. Senate, Bass said at a press event Friday evening. How dare you disrespect him and call him Jose? But I guess he just looked like anybody to you. Karen Bass is the only one who came close. She came the absolute closest to basically saying, yeah, you're being fucking racist, dude. Because of this idea that all Hispanics look alike. And who does that happen to? Fucking racists. Vance made the remarks about Padilla and other California Democrats after he toured an FBI mobile command center and met with Marines in Los Angeles, a city where clashes between protesters and law enforcement officials have become a focal point of the opposition to the Trump administration's immigration agenda. During the news conference, Vance accused Newsom and Bass, both Democrats who have heavily criticized Trump's deployment of National Guard troops, of encouraging protests that have occasionally turned violent. What I see here today is the great tragedy when a mayor and a governor encourages their citizens to harass and endanger the lives of our police officers and our law enforcement officers. Pretty sure that's the same fucking thing, but okay. It's heartbreaking to see, and thank God we've got great people who are willing to persevere despite it, Vance said. Funnily enough, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, the LAPD said that everything was just dandy until Trump decided to play strongman and send in the National Guard and the Marines, because nobody was protesting their involvement, and then suddenly they were. Everything was peaceful until that point. Now, you could say that some people just simply took advantage of the protests. I mean, obviously there are people who do that. But the fact is that everybody was getting along until Trump decided to make a big deal out of something that wasn't. Bass fiercely pushed back on Vance's characterization, accusing the vice president of spewing lies and utter nonsense in an attempt to provoke division and conflict in our city. How dare you say that city officials encourage violence? We kept the peace. You know that the federal officials that were here protected a federal building. They were not involved in crowd control. Crowd control is handled most aptly by the Los Angeles Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, and local law enforcement, she said. Newsom and Bass have maintained that violent protests in the city have been confined to a small area, and on Monday, Bass lifted a curfew in downtown Los Angeles after a drop in arrests. What else was I going to say about that? Oh yes, and not everybody who was deployed actually got orders. Most of them were sitting there twiddling their thumbs. Not to mention they didn't have food or equipment or a place to fucking stay. So they were sleeping on the floor. I mean, I felt bad for these people because they knew that they were being political pawns, that this wasn't a legit use of their forces. Newsom, a potential 2028 presidential contender, said earlier Friday that Vance should spend quality time with victims of the wildfires that devastated large parts of Los Angeles this year, pointedly referring to a threat by President Donald Trump to withhold additional wildfire relief because of his dust-ups with Newsom. hope you have an opportunity to spend some quality time with some of the victims of the families in the Palisades, and also spend some time in Altadena, which is incredibly important, Newsom said in a video on X. It's also important as well, and I honestly mean this, that you sit down with the President of the United States, who just a couple of days ago suggested that these American citizens may not get the support that other citizens get all across this country in terms of disaster relief. Oh, don't worry about that, Governor Newsom. Trump is dismantling FEMA, so nobody will get disaster relief, so it's all good. Newsom did not receive formal notice about Vance's trip, his Deputy Director of Communications, Brandon Richards, said in a statement. The governor would welcome the opportunity to meet with Vice President in service to Californians, Richards said. We're always open to working together, which makes it all the more disappointing that the White House chose not to engage with us directly ahead of the visit. Vance's visit is the latest in the battle between Democrats and the Trump administration over its hardline deportation policies after an appeals court ruled in the administration's favor Thursday. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it's likely that the president lawfully exercised his statutory authority in deploying California National Guard troops to respond to protests in Los Angeles. The decision stemmed California Attorney General Rob Bonta's lawsuit against Trump administration after Trump sent the troops to the city without Newsom's approval. And actually, what they don't mention is two of those on the panel were Trump appointees and one was a Biden appointee. On Tuesday, U.S. Northern Command said it was activating 2,000 additional National Guard troops to Los Angeles to support the protection of federal functions, personnel, and property in the greater Los Angeles area. Translation: helping ICE. That brings the number of National Guard troops deployed to the city to more than 4,000 since the protests erupted this month. Trump also deployed Marines to assist law enforcement in the response to demonstrations. Trump and his administration's immigration actions have sparked outrage among Democratic lawmakers, including Padilla, who was forcibly removed and handcuffed after he tried to question Noem at our news conference last week. The protests formed after Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents raided 3 places in central Los Angeles in early June, triggering a domino effect of similar demonstrations nationwide. While the protests have largely dissipated in recent days, the Los Angeles Dodgers said Thursday that they had blocked federal immigration agents from entering their stadium after they requested permission to access the parking lots. And one more thing, Trump is whining about wildfire protection in California. And Governor Newsom basically responded on X with dude, that's literally what the National Guard was doing. They were protecting from wildfire danger. They were making sure that the forest didn't have the fuel to trigger a wildfire. What the hell do you think the National Guard does? So, yeah, basically Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So, which includes, and this might be breaking news for some of you, we attacked Iran. And I can only hope that what the Iranians are saying is true, is that all 3 of those nuclear sites that we hit had been abandoned a while ago. Because, first off, nuclear fallout. Secondly, just this idea that, that we basically attacked a country is just sickening to me. So hopefully, if it's true, it's been abandoned. Maybe there won't be a retaliation, but I'm not holding my breath. But anyway, that is all I have of those articles. So let's now do a story. Let's have story time. Okay. Oops, that's too big. I cannot do that. Shit. Okay, I guess I can read this. So, this is in relation to what's known as the Black Nite Uprising. I believe I have that right. So, on a hot and foggy August night, 4 sailors went to a Milwaukee gay bar on a dare. Which, things always have a happy ending when that is the first sentence. After starting a fight with the bouncer, they were chased off by a bar patron in a bathrobe wielding beer bottles in each hand. Embarrassed to be beaten up by a homosexual, they vowed to come back and clean up the bar and teach those sick faggots a lesson. And later that night, they did come back. But these sailors didn't know what they were dealing with. Josie Carter, a gender non-conforming black queen, had already given their friend a concussion. Love it. They had threatened her, her boyfriend, and her bar before she'd ever had to come to finish putting on her makeup for the night. As Saturday night customers rolled in, she wound up the Black Nite crowd with the story, encouraging them to stay and defend the bar if the sailors came back. Owner Wally Wetham wanted to lock up the bar and send everyone home, but people were sick and tired of running. Now, before I continue, this was happening in 1961. So, 8 years before Stonewall. Only a year before, a police raid in Juneau Park resulted in Elroy Schultz, a gay brewery worker, being beaten to death. Gay men were hassled with sting operations everywhere they went. They were disowned, demoralized, and disrespected at every turn, and now violence was on their doorstep. One more aside. This is happening in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Juneau Park is another city in Wisconsin. And this story is being written by the Milwaukee Historical Society, which the spot of the Black Nite Bar now has an LGBTQ plus history marker. First in the state. We do not run from a fight, Josie told the crowd. We do not run from anything. On August 5th, 1961, Milwaukee learned how true this was. When the sailors returned, they weren't just fighting Josie and the bouncer anymore. They were fighting an army of angry queens, lesbians, and gay men who had reached their breaking point with nothing left to lose. The Black Nite Brawl at 400 North Plankington was the first LGBTQ uprising in Wisconsin history, 6 years before Stonewall. Okay, 6 years. All right. 5 years before Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco and 4 years before the Dewey's protests in Philadelphia, our elders took an early stand against homophobia and fought back. In case you thought that Stonewall was some sort of aberration and that just suddenly gay people got so upset in this one event. No, there were plenty of uprisings before then. Local news coverage sought to scandalize the event. Instead, the news stories changed the course of history. For the first time, Milwaukee knew that gay people existed here, and in large enough numbers to have their own spaces, and that they would fight back if provoked. For the first time, isolated LGBTQ people learned that they were not alone in the world, but that they had a local community. For the first time, Milwaukee's LGBTQ people felt pride after a lifetime of shame, guilt, rejection, and scorn. And that is what pride means. It doesn't mean that the sinful idea that we have pride to the point of not caring for others. It's that we have pride that we are not going to let you shame us because we are not like you. The sailors were cleared of all charges. Of course they were. The bar was ordered to close. Within a few years, the entire block containing the city's earliest known gay bars was deliberately demolished. But a seed had been planted within the community's earliest gay rights activists, and by 1962, the Milwaukee Journal was reporting that the homosexual has gotten bolder. By 1969, over 36 gay bars had opened in Milwaukee, which allowed men to dance together, something forbidden throughout the Midwest. To her death in 2014, Josie humbly downplayed the event as just another wild night out. She refused to accept the title of Mother of Gay Milwaukee, even as a whole new generation of transgender youth adopted her as a transistor. Jesus Christ. Until our researchers connected the dots between oral interviews, newspaper clippings, testimonials, and timelines, the historical significance of the event was unknown. We seek to unhide this history and make this historical event well known to all Milwaukeeans. We seek to connect Milwaukeeans with their... I'm not going to continue with that. Okay, this is the rest of their application, which, like I said, was accepted, to put the history marker for the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project. All right, so I will stop there. So, just trying to see. I think I covered everything that I wanted to. So, with that, and since this video is almost 2 hours long, which I was not expecting, but with that, I will see you guys in the next video.